Hello and welcome at the new episode of Change Talks. And today my guest is Philippe Riboton. Philippe is a French guy, French person, and we are now sitting in the beautiful city center of Prague to discuss the change and the change in a very specific area. Because Philippe is a journalist, serial entrepreneur, and most importantly, he's a professional headhunter. So he's the person who's hunting and stealing the good people for executive roles across the whole Europe. So Philippe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Victor. I'm very glad to be here.
Change Talks, your passport to exciting changes in your business, career, and life. Change Talks, your podcast when it's time to do things differently.
So as I said, you are a professional headhunter and you've been doing that for many years. Yeah? Sometime. Yeah. You don't want me to mention how long.
You can say it.
Yeah. Not to look too old. Yeah. But always when I say that I'm doing change management for 2 decades, it tells something, right? So you've been doing that for quite a long time. So the first question could be quite obvious. Okay. How has this headhunting business, headhunting industry changed and evolved over years?
Well, I would say honestly, to answer your question and to be completely honest about it, it's been almost 30 years, 30 and not 13. So that's a long period of time. But to be also fully honest, I have to say that I was running a recruitment company during the first 10 years in parallel to another company involved in the media industry. So, I was basically active in both the media industry as a publisher, because I used to be a journalist, and as a managing director of a recruitment company. But to answer your question, honestly, I would say the first 20 years didn't witness such a major change. I'm speaking here about basically 95 to 2015, more or less. I think the changes have been occurring mostly for the past 10 years, and they are taking place or accelerating as we speak, especially because of tech and particularly, of course, because of AI.
Mm-hmm. So the recent trends around AI, what it actually means, okay? How the companies that are looking for new people or the candidates, how they are using now AI?
Well, to be honest with you, we use AI as most companies as a let's say the entry level of AI, which is almost like enterprise software. Like most companies use only AI to a very, let's say, entry degree. Only few companies push it to have it as a proper BI system that helps them, supports them, and if not in some cases actually is replacing a human interaction into recruiting, into retention, so how do you keep people basically in your companies, into learning, so how people basically train themselves and learn, and then even further down the line into talent management, so which is basically how do you maintain the relationship and the tie and the link between the company and the employees.
When I was talking to Denisa Schmeitz, also HR professional, on one of the episodes of Change Talks, she mentioned a quite interesting thing, that when she sees that a candidate, a person, is actually using AI for resume, to write a CV, the letters and so on, she actually sees that as an advantage. Is it common approach? Is it like common opinion in the circle of HR professionals and recruiters? They say, okay, I got a CV that was obviously written by AI, and I think okay, it's cool. Or is it like red flag that the person is cheating and should be avoided?
I think you can look at it both ways, and no doubt. You can definitely look at the fact that some of the people that you deal with are friendly with AI. So in other words, they use it, and it's true that one could even think that in the future, the job market will kind of divide between AI in itself on one side, and on the other side, people who are friendly using AI, and that lots of jobs will simply disappear. So that is, let's say, an assumption of a certain number of people who say this is what the future of work will be, AI on one side and people who will deal with AI on the other. But the second way to look at it is as you were referring to, Victor, and it's very true, and it's actually, unfortunately, my daily experience, which is I'm receiving, in a certain number of cases, a certain number of applications from people who've been maybe using AI a bit too much. Fortunately, I'm in a business where I always meet people. So, I'm not recruiting people virtually. I do speak with them quite often, with obviously Zoom or Team or that kind of a tool, but there is a stage, and there is always a stage when I meet physically with people, the way we are meeting today. So, even if people have been faking their skills, their education, their career, thanks to AI, or to say more politely, improving the way they look on their CV, there is, of course, the moment of truth, which is the moment we meet, the moment I exchange, I interact with them. And if they actually speak differently, if they look differently, or if obviously they lie, which is the case of every second person during a recruitment interview, then we have a problem.
That's interesting. I actually never have heard of this kind of statistics. That every second person is lying in the interview.
I would assume so.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So you also have to be a good lie detector.
I don't know if I'm a good lie detector, but at least I have what you can call a bit of wisdom, and I don't necessarily take for granted what people tell me. This is also what I'm paid for. I'm paid for to filter the informations I receive. So I take note of the informations I receive, but then there is another, it's only the beginning of the process, meaning later on we check a lot on people. So, and we check on what they told us, either ourselves or through external sources, and we make sure that what they pretend they have done is actually true.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit going back again to AI, because that's quite a popular topic. When the companies are now looking for senior managers, is the AI skill set, the knowledge of AI becoming a demand? Is it now on the job descriptions, or still kind of in a gray zone?
I wouldn't call it AI knowledge, but I would call it AI familiarity, meaning like it is something which is invading our life from all aspects, which we had no idea 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, that it would go that deep, and yet we have no idea how it's going to be in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years, how much AI will get into our lives and into our jobs. So obviously, when we are looking for CEOs, chief marketing officer, marketing people especially, all professions which have something to do with customer interactions, of course we're looking for people who are familiar with what is it that AI is changing to the game. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to be AI specialists, but they have to be familiar with AI trends and what AI is changing both to their profession, to the job they hold, as well as to their industry.
Because what I see in the companies, the situation is that actually the proficiency in AI is better on lower positions. Yeah? You mentioned people working in marketing, sales. These people start to use AI to support their daily job, to write a lot of texts, emails, copywriting, and so on. And the managers and the executive officers, for them AI is kind of still very weird animal. They don't know what to think about it and how to use it in their business.
I think it varies from industry to industry. So you cannot generally say that, let's say familiar people or AI-friendly people will tend to be on the bracket specialists, let's say, and then you have the management population, which would be sort of a bit resistant to whatever AI is about. It's true that you have some industries which are very AI sensitive. I'm thinking, of course, everything which is connected to e-commerce, everything which is obviously tech, that's obvious. And you have industries where, and I'm thinking especially to, more manufacturing-orientated type of industries where AI is still something kind of new. Then you need to add to that you have, for many managers and many top executives, the issue about basically the security threat that AI is bringing to the table, and lots of them see AI, rightfully in quite a number of cases, by the way, as a potential threat of security, leak of information. So that's also a threat. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah. So the typical symptoms of change resistance in a way. Yeah. So because very often people are just looking for excuses to try to avoid what is unknown. And speaking of change and change resistance, how often you are looking for professions of change managers? Is it common? Is it less common? What's the situation on the market?
There was a period when it was very fashionable, and that period was COVID. So basically, every second assignment we had during the COVID period was, let's call it rather politely, transformation. Which it's a big buzzword.
It's a buzzword. It's a code word for
exactly.
And
it's
everything.
A very nice buzzword that hides very different realities and objectives, by the way. But still, it covers a period of change that companies face. Whatever this change is about, and change does not need to be, only positive. Change can also be a company, basically downsizing,
cutting costs.
It can be a company
firing people,
closing.
Yeah.
It can be companies merging. It can be companies clusterizing, declusterizing. This is the kind of stuff we are very familiar with because this is our ordinary sort of a business. So obviously, when COVID hit, the recruitment industry was almost dead, you could say, paralyzed, because companies stopped immediately. They stopped hiring. But in quite many cases, our clients, took it as an opportunity and looked at the opportunity that this unexpected period was opening up, which was change. So they were forced to stop, think, and decide what is it that they had to change. Not necessarily that they wanted to change, but they had to change because suddenly employees were not, going to the office anymore. Retail operations were closed, so they needed to basically reinvent themselves in a way, and therefore they had to initiate change. In some cases, the change lasted, meaning like what they initiated as a change during the COVID period lasted, and we could speak about it, what it meant in terms of implications for remote work and so forth. But in some cases, it didn't last, and they got back to the model they had prior to COVID.
Yeah, that's interesting topic. Yeah, so maybe elaborate a little bit on that. You mentioned remote work. Remote work, because of the COVID pandemic, became a must, right? And to me, it's very funny in a way, because when I was studying also information management. And one idea, one concept that was showed to us was the virtual corporation. And the idea was that the corporations in the future will basically employ people globally. Okay, you are looking for a specialist in certain area, and that person is in India. Okay, so you will have that person from India, and then you will have another person who is sitting in France, who is sitting in Brazil, whatever, because there is technology that allows that. And this concept seemed to us young students as something like that is really knocking on the door, because the technology it was there already, like video conferencing, internet, all the stuff. And funny enough, it took many decades and the COVID pandemic to just little bit, get close to this idea. And now, when the COVID is over, or let's say back to normal, how we will call it, I see a lot of pushback in certain companies to go back to the situation, as it had been before the COVID, which is pushing people back in the office and so on. So, how you see the situation from the headhunter perspective? Because there are some managers, business owners who want to have people back in the office, but more and more people, employees, managers, they want to have this kind of freedom. How this clash is actually materializing in real life?
I think that I see two different topics into what you just referred to, Victor. One is when you refer to this period of time when we were sort of poaching talent globally, and indeed companies were expecting or had the imagination that they could have their IT guys in India, their customer service outsourced somewhere in Morocco, part of their management team spread across Europe. This has changed, I think, a bit, because this was on the bracket, this was the great age of globalization. And you remember those years when, everything and everybody was crazy about becoming on the bracket global. And now, for the past few years, we see it in the election of Donald Trump yesterday, and everything, which is all the elections taking place in Europe, also show it that a big expectation of people today is to go back, and there is this sore feeling against globalization. So we can see that the world is or at least people, the societies, are moving away from globalization. Also for one good reason, which is that a lot of countries have lost thousands and thousands of jobs because of globalization, and they have seen their work, the jobs basically going to India, going to North Africa, wherever that is. So I think this is one part. The second part you're referring to, which is the remote work and the habit of remote work introduced by or let's say activated or accelerated by COVID, which is very much true. And one can say that when COVID stopped, there was this sort of let's say assumption from both employers and employees that the new name of the game would be that people would be working 3 days in the office and 2 days remotely. And this is the balance which I think most employees have agreed to sort of build their new life on, which has also changed a lot of things from many perspectives, because we could also discuss how this has changed the place where people live and the place where people work, because quite many people have changed the place they live in, because they had this flexibility of being basically in a different place 4 days a week, 2 days remote work plus weekend. And they have, if we speak about the French scene or the French case, which I can tell you about a bit, this has participated for cities such as Bordeaux or Nantes, for example, to take hundreds or if not thousands of jobs from Paris, because people have, while still continuing to work in Paris, they have moved their life base to Bordeaux or Nantes, for example, in places which are actually offer a better quality of life. Now, it is true what you're saying, which is that we can see and we can feel and we can read that there is a growing, let's say, trend towards, at least from the companies, not from employees. So from the companies to tell to the people, come back. Now it's time to come back. And in some cases, you've seen it in the Silicon Valley with big names in the IT world who have said, well, the game is over. Everybody is back to the office. So it's clear that the wind is blowing this direction, but yet I feel that the balance, that quite many people, both on the employer side and the employee side, are looking to maintain is some kind of balance.
What do you think is the root cause for this pressure to get employees back to the office?
Well, what you can see is that in many companies they have lost teams, especially in areas that require really teamwork. Teamwork meaning really like
interaction,
fast interactions, and like a sports team. Imagine a sports team that would be training remotely, and only on the day they're supposed to play the football match or whatever, they would meet and play together. No, I think in quite many areas where people are working really, really closely, or in some industries where there is this sort of very close tie between people, there is the need for this physical interaction. So in quite many companies, I witnessed that the management feels that they have lost, a bit of this enthusiasm. They have lost a bit of this energy, and they assume that by bringing back more often people at work, but people at work maybe differently. That is an interesting topic of discussion. Meaning, like in quite many cases, I see that the management of companies want people back to the office, but they do different things while at the office. Meaning, like it's not like back to the office like before. It's back to the office, but with a focus on more interaction, more social work, more physical meetings, and not back to the office in the sense like everybody's back to the office behind a computer and sending emails.
It's interesting view that you have, because my hypothesis is a little bit different, and maybe it's like skewed by how I see or what I see. Because when I work with the clients, it's usually because they are having some sort of problem. They are having some inefficiency. So when everything is nice, fine, and smooth, okay, and there's no job for me, and I'm not there. So I don't see the perfect world, okay. And you have the insights in both, I guess. Now, my take, on why some managers, some companies are pushing employees back, is because basically the management team is unsure how to really manage people remotely. Yeah, because if you have full office of people, okay, everybody looks busy, and your superior comes and asks, okay, what are your people doing? You can say, okay, look at them. Everybody is here sitting at the desk, and they are quite busy, right? So it's fine on the surface. Now, if they are just spread somewhere remotely, and somebody says, okay, what are your people doing? And you have a weak manager, a manager that doesn't know how to manage people remotely, doesn't have an answer, right? That's a bad situation to be in as a manager. So that's what I witness that's what I see as a root cause. That there are still managers that manage people, that lead people by just physical presence in the office, not by performance. They are not able to describe clearly what are the objectives, and then to watch for the outcome and compare that. Right? Obviously, but what you said about, let's say, the eligibility for the remote work, that's definitely true. There are certain positions, there are certain jobs, tasks, situations when remote work is not going to work to be just possible. Yeah? You cannot be receptionist and do it remotely, right? If you need to have really very vivid and lively interaction among the people, you should have them face to face in one room. Right? But sometimes, I feel it's more of an excuse than the real reason. But that's, as I say, my maybe a little bit skewed perception of the reality, because what I see is usually like situations that need improvement and then they need change.
Okay, Victor, but okay, we should discuss that or mention and develop the point that the office after COVID is not the office before COVID. What I mean by that, I will give you a very concrete illustration. I don't have that many clients who are in the case that you're referring to. My clients, the reality, the new reality on the bracket of the office and life at the office of quite many of my clients, I can describe it to you. Quite many of them have taken the opportunity of the COVID period while people were actually at home because they were working remotely. They have actually changed the office. So in other words, they have, they even in some cases, they actually have physically moved their office to another location, to another type of building or facility. And what most of my clients do now is basically in quite many cases, most of their employees don't have an office in a proper sense, the way you used to know it. You go through a corridor, you have a door, behind the door is your office, you have a desk, you have a small meeting table, and everybody has the same, on the bracket, office type. In quite many cases, my clients don't have this kind of office anymore. So what they have is basically, let's not call it open space, because
like
when thinking of open space, we think of these call centers with armies of people behind a very small desk, and a headset. So no, what they do have in quite many cases is basically, offices that look a bit like a home. You know what I'm saying? So meaning like they are a bit home-ish. So you have those canapes, you have those areas, corners where people, can work, quietly, not necessarily having the noise of other people around, and also having those sort of offices where people from anywhere can come, plug, work, have a drink in the company's bar, whatever, with people. Go to the meeting room, then go to another place where they work. This is the new office in quite many companies these days. There are maybe not that many of them in Prague that I would know of, but I can tell you, in places like London, like Paris, like Milano, like Munich, where my clients are headquartered, Brussels, Amsterdam. This is the new reality of office work.
Yeah. I've also seen this kind of offices, and it's funny enough, it was in other cities than Prague. It was in Vienna and so on. Yeah. Prague is not that common. Maybe it's some cultural thing, I don't know. But it's quite interesting to compare our views, right? Because everybody sees the reality through different lens, because we cooperate with different types of clients. We help them to solve different sort of problems. You help them to find the right people. I help them overcome some problems and issues. As I say, but there is no problem, there is no work for me. So what happened to these change managers that were in high demand during the COVID? Do they stay? Did they move to some other position? I'm asked this question because I say that the position of true change manager is always temporary. True. If you are a change manager by nature, then once your job is complete, it's time to move on for a new challenge. Is it a normal pattern? Did these people also move to other jobs and so on, or they stay?
No. I would say differently. I would say that the period of COVID, the sort of 3 years we went through, was a legitimate period of time when to appoint people in charge of change, because change needed to happen. Everybody agreed and everybody was confronted with the reality that all companies had to change the way they operated, the way their people were working. So, everybody had to change. There was this obligation to change, and therefore companies typically appointed people in charge of conducting and managing change, or call it transformation if you want. What I see now is that we are not that frequently assigned to find, call it change managers or transformation managers as it was the case during the COVID period, but we are assigned in a certain number of cases to find people who have regular roles in the management structure. Can be a CEO, can be a CFO, can be a commercial director, can be a marketing director. They're not labeled change managers, but they clearly have the task, to conduct change in a particular either country or in an organization. So it is not so marketed, let's put it this way, that they are change agents on the bracket, but in fact the content of their job, be it in finance, in marketing, in sales, or in general management, is about conducting change.
Mm-hmm. Now, saying, okay, your job is also about the change. Yeah? So there is a proportion. There is a proportion of running the business operationally. If you are, let's say CFO, there's the company wants that all the accounting is done properly, invoices are paid, all the operational stuff is done right. So that's the job for the CFO. But then it could be this, as you say, additional element, additional tasks, for change this, change that. How equipped are the managers actually, are the people, are the candidates now in the market to do change? Because there's, I always say there is a difference between the operational skill set and the change skill set. So how is your view, what's your experience to see this skill set on the market?
Well, let me give you a very concrete case, which is a very frequent type of situation that I face with quite a few of our clients. Let's look at the case of clusterization. This is the name of the game, and we are here in Prague today. And Prague is a Czech Republic. Let's not speak specifically about Prague, but Czech Republic is very much in the middle of a big process of clusterization. One may not see it when you are here in Prague and you sit in Prague, but I can tell you that most of our clients, international companies, are very busy working on a further clusterization of their operations in Central Europe. I'm not speaking just Czech Republic. So, it's a permanent change which they are playing with, putting together these countries in this region or unplugging some countries from the region. You can easily imagine which countries I have in mind. So, and this is it's a permanent basically change in their organizations. I will give you a very simple case. There was a period of time 20 years ago, when companies were declusterizing their Czechoslovak operations between Czech on one side and Slovakia on the other, in order to give, proper sort of a freedom in each of these two markets. Then the name of the game a few years later was to re-merge them, not call them Czechoslovakia, but call them Czech and Slovakia, Slovak operations. Then the next process was to put Hungary with it. So quite many companies started to have this kind of cluster made of Czech, Slovakia, and Hungary. And now what we see is the growing role of Poland in the region, and there is this big phenomenon taking place in quite many companies, which is that Poland is taking the regional leadership over Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary as a sort of seat of clusterized organizations across the region. And this is basically changing, to use the word that you use, organizations permanently. But it's not there is nobody really very much labeled as a change agent into this, but it's keeping a lot of people in my client's organization busy, I can tell you that.
Mm-hmm. So my question, are they well equipped from the skill set point of view?
Well, listen, it opens, it is true that when you clusterize an organization, let's take this example again of an organization which wants to clusterize, let's say, their finance function, for example, across Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. It translates in quite many cases into a very tough rule, which is that whereas you used to have 4 CFOs, 1 CFO for Poland, 1 CFO for Czech.
Some needs to go.
Apparently, they at the end of the musical chair exercise, you have only 1 remaining. But the interesting part, and this is a way to answer your question, is that we are looking for basically people who have the ability to make those different organizations, these different countries, those different cultures work together. So this is a way to address more precisely your question. We are looking for people with cross-cultural skills, abilities, so people who are not necessarily, only rooted in their home country, but people who are able to work and animate, motivate teams in different locations, teams of different nationalities, teams that in some cases whose culture may not be that friendly with each other, for various reasons, historic reasons, for example. So we are very much looking into this aspect of the profiles that we are looking for, meaning not only people who have the skills as a proper CFO, for example, to take the example I was referring to, but also who have this multicultural, this cross-cultural ability to make people of various countries, various cultures work together.
How difficult it is?
Well, it's not that easy, but on the other side, we are paid to search, so that makes the pool for us of the search bigger, because by definition, if you're looking, for example, for a regional CFO covering Poland, Czech, Slovakia, Hungary, we have 4 countries where to source talent instead of 1. So at the end of the day, that makes the pool of talent just simply bigger for us, and it's actually even more interesting.
What is actually the ratio? Let's say, how many people, how many profiles you have to review, to choose, the right person?
Well, it's a good question. On average, I would say for typically, a chief marketing officer, a chief sales officer, a chief financial officer, and of course a CEO, country managing director. I would say on average, first of all, duration-wise, I would say our assignments take somewhere between, at best, 2 to 3 months, worst 6 months. So we are somewhere in between, this kind of this duration. We over this period of time, we will on the bracket process, meaning approach and establish contact and have some kind of communication, virtual or not, with maybe somewhere between, let's say, 50 and 100 people, in total. We will have over this period of time maybe 40 interviews. Mm-hmm. And at the end, our short list will be made of 5, 6 people. And our client from this short list will select maybe 3 to sort of have advanced discussions. and then typically we have a final of 2, so that our client has the choice between 2 profile who has gone through the whole process of multiple interviews with multiple stakeholders, who have also built on their motivation to join our client, and basically they are ready to get married.
So you said 50 to 100 people
we approach,
in the initial pool,
yeah.
which is part of competition. Yeah? If you are a manager and you are looking for a new job, for a new assignment, then you have to compete with 100 people. So are there any kind of tips, tricks, insights, let's say, for the managers, professionals who want to change their career, how to be more successful, how to be more appealing in this process, when the recruiters, headhunters will take a look at their profiles and decide who proceeds to the final round and who's out?
I think there are different ways to answer your question, Victor, and different schools how to answer your point. You will have, quite many people, and we get back to AI, quite many people these days will tell you that first of all, your profile, if you candidate, if you apply for a role, assuming that you see that there's this interesting CMO, CFO role being advertised here or there, and you tell yourself, well, that sounds interesting, and you want to send out your application, the chances that the other person on the other side of the line and the person receiving your application today is actually AI. So the very first advice that quite many people will give you is that your CV, your application has to be AI friendly. And that translates, unfortunately, and we go back to what I was saying before, to the fact that I receive in quite a number of cases profiles of people who have pushed the AI exercise a bit too much, because it's just full of those their CV is full of those buzzwords, from agility to transformation, change, you name it. Basically, they have made it to the point that they tell themselves that, and in quite many cases, they are not that wrong, that the algorithm on the other side will screen them, will spot all those buzzwords that the AI was prompted to recognize, and their CV will go to the hiring manager, maybe once the AI has done its own work. That's one way to answer your question. This is not the way I work. So what I would recommend people, at least who we are speaking here about, let's say what you would call the management suite, sort of a type of executives, is to manage to establish a connection, and a proper connection with people like me, not necessarily only me, but people who do their work the way I do it, which is of course we do, like I told you, we do use AI, but we are not recruiting people with chatbots and software. So what we do is we establish a connection with people, and when I say connection, it's not just a virtual connection. We meet, we speak. In quite many cases, I go have lunch with them or dinner, and we build a relationship. Because it's not just about processing a CV or a candidate. By the way, most people I'm dealing with, they are not candidates to anything. So you need to don't confuse me with a recruiter who's processing CVs and who's doing the sort of HR processing kind of work and passing some candidates on the bracket to the hiring manager. I'm not doing this job. My job is to make people interested to the roles that I'm contracted by companies to fill. So it's a complete different way to approach people. So I would recommend, to answer your question, I would recommend if people are looking for this seniority of role, and particularly if it involves for them a change. We go back to your favorite topic of discussion. It's to establish more than a connection, a relationship with a headhunter like me, and build and meet, discuss what is it that drives their motivation, what they are looking for, really beyond a job description, beyond a position which is being advertised here or there. Because at the end of the day, what I do, in my job, most of the time, I'm interacting with, pretty senior people in my client's organization, that can be up to the group CEO level, in some cases, even the owners of a company. And, when I meet the CEO or president of the company, like I did this morning here in Prague, they don't ask me the CV of the person. They turn to me, they look at me and they say, Philippe, why do you think we should take this person for this role? What makes this person different? What makes this person unique? At which stage of his or her career is he or is she? Why is it that he or she would change? What is it that would make him or her change and join us? So it's a complete different way to look at it.
Yeah, so I think that here the lesson is to always adjust your strategy based on what you want to achieve, right? So if you want to be CEO of the company, probably it's not going to be about sending CVs just online, and etc. It's, as you say, about establishing this kind of relationship, because also many of these positions are not advertised. Very often there is still a person in this, in the position, sometimes even not aware that the owner of the company or the CEO of the company is looking for replacement. So you are, playing on a difficult, market, and sometimes usually I assume that you cannot even disclose in the first maybe 1 or 2 rounds who is the client, when you are just mapping, the fit of the person to the company and to the role. Now, still talking about the change of the career, switch of the career. How often do you see that people really change their careers in the terms of moving from one industry to another industry, or from one function to another? So to move from from finance to automotive, moving from marketing to IT or whatever. Is it frequent? Yes, no. And is it because, I don't know, I'm a little bit assuming what you are going to say, but in a case that it's not very frequent, would you say that the issue is rather with the companies who are reluctant to accept these kind of switches, or is it because there is not enough people willing to take the risk that is associated with such a bold move?
Well, it depends about what kind of change you're referring to, Victor. If you speak about the profession itself, obviously, there are some professions where it's kind of it may be a bit difficult to move from one era to the other. So let's take an example. You will hardly move from a CFO role to a CMO role. So, but you may move from a CMO role to a CSO role, for example. So in quite many cases, in quite many organizations, the head, if there can be one head for both commercial and marketing activities, for example. And as a result, they may actually appoint a person coming either from the commercial era or from the marketing era. But it's true that when it comes to really the sourcing of expertise, I would say mostly those two fields, marketing and sales, are areas where you can sort of switch.
Interchangeable.
Exactly, where you can maybe eventually change from one to the other. But you will hardly again move from, R&D or legal or finance to marketing and vice versa. What you see is people making it to the GM or the CEO role or the country management role, let's put it this way, coming either from marketing or coming from sales or coming from finance. It is an obvious advancement for people to move from, in quite many companies, from CFO to CEO, CFO to GM. Quite many companies tend to favor people who have a strong financial knowledge in order to make it to the top or the number one role. So that's quite frequent. But of course, if you are into for example, e-commerce kind of businesses where for example, marketing background is really key. The tracking for the GM role might be rather on the marketing side, meaning to move from CMO to the CEO role. But back to your question from a different angle, which is rather industries rather than professions. Yes, it's true that in quite many sectors, we as headhunters and or advisors, you would say, we face the difficulty that our clients are sort of a bit cold to the idea of recruiting somebody from outside their industry. So it's quite frequent, and especially with my HR counterparts, whenever I'm interacting with HR managers or HR directors, that for them it is pretty logic that if you're looking for a chief sales officer in the pharma sector, then you will source that person in the pharma sector, and that they will hardly imagine that you are going to source that person from automotive or from financial services, and vice versa. If you're looking for, you have a pretty strong background yourself, Victor, in the financial industry. It's not that usual to recruit people, in the financial service company, in manufacturing, for example. So. But it's also true that in quite many cases, I can give you the case I was discussing with my client this morning, who's about to launch a new business here in the Czech Republic, and the president of the company this morning told me, honestly, at the end of the day, yes, the knowledge of our industry has a value. It's a CEO role, so it's a country management, general management role, if you can call it. So true, it has a value, but we have a very specific setup, a momentum of launching our activities, and we are rather looking for specific personality traits rather than industry experience. So in other words, I would assume that if tomorrow we get to, and hopefully it's going to be the case, we will be screening their industry here in the Czech Republic, meaning like screening the top 20 or 30 CEOs and general managers of this industry. Most probably from a life experience, personality traits, we will eliminate 90% of them, because of this very specific momentum our client has, and therefore we're going to be looking outside their industry, meaning for people who have gone through this momentum of business in whatever industry it is.
As you say, it's a quite of rare case. It's not very usual. Because in most of the cases, in most of the times, there is kind of risk resistance to say, let's try to hire somebody who is outside the industry, believing that if you recruit a person who has the experience, who has the know-how from the industry, that you will somehow benefit from that, right? On the other hand, the question is how much innovation, how much fresh ideas you will get from that person, right? Because I see it as a little paradox that in the job descriptions, it's very often said, that the person will be responsible for some changes and innovations and fresh new ideas. But asking for this from a person who's been doing the same thing, the same stuff for 20, 30 years. That's quite, unrealistic, right? And we also discussed that actually, with Denis Ashmates and other episode of Change Talks podcast, that this is still prevailing, but that the managers really should think more about the attitudes or about the personality, because in many situations the knowledge can be just learned, right? Unless you are doing something very specific, launching rockets, to the space, perhaps, it's about some general skill set. It's about willingness. It's about having the capability to view the things from the fresh perspective, and the rest you can, in most situations, learn. But you confirm that this is not very common. This is not very frequent. So, if there are listeners, who are considering this kind of change, if they want to move from one industry to another industry, do you have any tips, recommendations, how to do that, how to persuade the hiring managers that they could be good fit, even though they are not experienced in that very industry?
Well, my first recommendation would be, to tell you the truth, is speak to the right people and target the right people. It is true, again, I don't want to be unfriendly with the HR community. I wouldn't dare to do this. But it is true that in quite many cases, HR officers and HR people are trained to sort of do exactly what you said, meaning, reproduce systems, reproduce a vision, and therefore they will be screening people based on similarities, a bit like an algorithm.
It's like AI. Yeah, they're looking for the key phrases, for the keywords.
kind of. So what I would recommend to people who are in the situation which you describe, which is eventually they're looking for a change of, for example, industry. They are looking for and eventually in some cases, nature of role, for example, is try to identify the right person to speak to in the company that you may target, or you may build like a headhunter would do it. You may basically build your own short list of companies that you find interesting in the industry which you are targeting, and then identify the people who are the decision makers, the real decision makers in those companies. They may not be in the country where you are, so they might be in those cluster organization somewhere else in the region, or they might be on the headquarter level, particularly if we speak about senior roles. If you're looking for a GM or role, for example, or a country management role, the chance is pretty high that the decision maker is not in the country that you are targeting, and that this person is somewhere again in working in the regional seat, or in the European management team, or simply in the very top management of the company. So my recommendation is do your own short list of companies in the industry you're interested in. Do your own short list of decision makers within these companies that you are targeting, and again, assuming that they are not necessarily in your country. Not to mention, of course, you can also turn to people like me. They will help you identify in those organizations where the decision makers are. So I think headhunters normally they should be able to help you in that respect. But my recommendation is try to speak, try to identify people who make decisions, because if you leave your faith, your future, your destiny in the hands of either an AI or some sort of platform where your CV is landing, or where your letter of intent or intention is being sent to, you might get disappointed, and you might end up being very frustrated.
Yeah. So the learning here is to have a plan, actually, as always. When you want to change anything, you should have a plan. Just like the high level intent is never enough. It's never going to work, and you need to have a plan that actually is going to really understand what are the key levers of the change, right? Because as you said, sending just CVs in a random way is not going to fly. You need to really think, okay, when, who's making the decision, when, where, how, and be present at those people, at those touch points. Now, talking about the change of the career, sometimes can happen quite involuntarily, especially these days. Right? Is outplacement also something that you are involved in or not?
To be honest with you, no. And there are people who specialize into outplacement, and I think they do their job much better than I would. So on the principle, no. We are commissioned, and we are basically contracted by companies to actively look for people, and the probability, it happens. To be honest with you, because my daily job is also to meet people informally who with outside the spectrum of active assignments that we have, and it happens sometimes that we have those planets which are sort of colliding and which we didn't expect. It can happen, but the probability is at the end of the day relatively low. So in other words, the probability that you will contact me, as you are foreseeing, a change, and it will match with an ongoing and active assignment we have in that particular country, with a job location in the particular city where you live, is actually pretty low. And I think that the outplacement in itself also is a different job than mine.
Okay, I was just curious, what's the scope of your work, and also if you have some experience of meeting or helping these people to find, let's say, a new job or a new career. But that's not.
Listen, I'm always interested speaking to and meeting with interesting people. So on the principle, people in, let's say, on the executive level, whether they work in finance, in marketing, in legal affairs, in HR, in general management, and they're open to the idea of considering a change, or simply sort of open from an opportunity perspective, meaning not closing the door to anything that interesting that could come along. I would say for sure they can contact me, but and I will most of the time, and I can tell you I make it almost a religion to always answer people. I think that there is a tragedy in the HR industry, and I'm speaking here specifically in the recruitment industry, which is that people don't answer applications or letters or emails. I can tell you I'm making it a principle that I do answer every single person who does approach me, and it's not an AI who is answering. It's me. So, which means that I'm always reactive and attentive to people who approach me. Only in cases, of course, that the typology of experience they have, and as you understood, I'm very much focused on people with international experience. So people with, I was referring to those cross-border multicultural skills, this is our DNA. We are interested into this population of people who have been eventually raised in one country, worked in another one, eventually got expatriated at some stage, or repatriated. This is where our focus is this population of people with a very strong international, multinational, cross-border focus and experience. So if the people have this kind of background experience, wherever they are based, whether they are in the US, in North America, in Asia, in Europe, they can contact me because I'm the right guy to speak with. What I cannot guarantee is that at the moment they're going to approach me, I will have in my pocket the type of assignment and the type of role that they will be interested in. But I'm pretty sure that I can help them identify potential companies for them to consider. Interesting companies which are active in and operating in the countries that they are looking at. And in some cases, I may give them, some advice on how to market, not just themselves and their CV and so on, but to also market what is it they're looking for. Because, at the end of the day, most of the time I spend is not about screening CVs and what is it that people have done 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and why they moved from that job to that job. And I'm not in this business. I'm in the business of understanding what is it that people want. It's not the business of what is it that people did. It's the business of understanding what people want. It's a complete different industry, and it's a complete different role than to screen people and to ask them, dozens of questions about why is it that they did what they did 20 years ago, and what is it that they did in that job 15 years ago. Honestly, in most cases, I don't care. What I'm really interested is what is it that people want.
So it really goes beyond just what is right now as an open position.
For sure.
You want to have long-term relationship with these people and guide them, maybe help them even find what they want. And you mentioned that you help them to better present them, which leads me to the personal brand. How important is these days personal brand for these top executives, and are they actively building that, or is it still kind of underdeveloped, forgotten? What is the perception of the personal brand?
Again, like in quite many questions that you raised, Victor, there are different ways to answer and different, I think, angles on the question. To be honest with you, I'm always a bit, at least skeptical, if not cautious, about people who have a very strong personal branding.
Why is that?
Well, it's a bit what I call the Tinder effect. It's like it may not be what it looks like.
Too good to be true, kind of.
Yeah, I would say too much branding will kill you. So in other words, I think there must be a certain level of humility, a certain decence, and a certain it's something that of course you need a bit of it, because if you don't have any, then of course what are your chances to be remarketed in a different industry, or in a different country. So I agree that personal branding, there must be. We all need a bit of personal branding, but too much personal branding will kill you. In quite many cases, when I see that people have done a lot of it, to me it's like quite often it's a red flag. Meaning, like, I'm going to look at the person, because obviously the person is screaming, "Look at me!" Look how interesting I am. But for me, that's going to be like at least a question mark, if not a red flag, that there is something to search there. There is something about it behind, and I'm going to try to understand what it is, what it is about. So I think personal branding, I would say be cautious, and especially these days, you even have like consultants in personal branding. You can have the same way you have people who are advising how people should market themselves on Tinder. You know what I'm saying? It's just like it's the same way, it's the same thing in the professional world or in the world of relationships. And I'm again always a bit skeptical about people who do too much of it.
Probably the question is what is too much? Because when I'm often meeting people, experienced professionals, who have this kind of problem. They probably decide, okay, I want to change, do the change in my career, and they realize that nobody outside their company knows them. There are people who have achieved tremendous success, in the company. They've typically been in the company for 10 years, something like 15 years. Very senior people, not in terms of age, but in terms of role. And they realize that nobody outside this very small social bubble actually knows them. And they think, okay, I was not very smart because I haven't been building my personal brand outside of this very small and very tiny social bubble. And you say, just, do it perhaps, but be careful not to overdo it.
True.
So, is there any kind of, what was the right balance then? How much is too much, or can you have any practical tip and advice how to build, let's say, a healthy personal brand that will help these people when they are looking then for a new job, switch careers?
I will answer this way, Victor. You can imagine that, of course, when we are in an advanced stage of selection on a senior executive role, we do a lot of screening on the people, and especially in the social world, let's say. So we go beyond the checking of their professional achievements and their professional track record, because imagine you're appointing a CFO. My client is about to appoint a CFO. So in other words, the person who's gonna be responsible for the financial resources or assets of a company, you better know, and you better have checked pretty significantly on the person from different angles. I'm not going to elaborate here, but you can imagine that this is also part of our responsibility to do or to outsource in some cases this kind of background checks. Particularly for sensitive roles. I'm thinking typically for a CFO role, for a GM role. This is something that we do, and then this what you call personal branding, or let's call it social branding part also is part of it. And I remember the case of, I will not name the company, of course, but I remember that the case of this recruitment we were in charge of actually here in Prague not too long ago, where everything in the selection process was very fine. The person who was in an advanced stage of discussion with our client was all fine from a professional background. And achievements and references and so on, but then when we started, screening the social networks on that person, we discovered things which were bothering. So in other words, this person had, let's say, social media activity and content which was disturbing. And you may think that okay, this is maybe borderline, this is maybe on the edge, but at the end of the day, if you are aiming at being the CEO or the country manager of a company, you also bear the name of the company. You're the face, you're the voice of that brand in that country. And if your social image in social media is not very much in line with the brand you're gonna represent, then there is a problem. But there was nothing wrong about the person when it comes to what the person had done in his in his career. The advancement was right. The skills that the person had developed were right. The roles that the person had progressed into were right. But this social branding was very wrong.
So probably better than to have bad branding. Better than to have good branding is not to have bad branding, right? or
not too much of it. I would say, to be honest with you, it's not that great to have bad branding. But I would not recommend to have too much branding either. So I think it's a sort of something to measure and to evaluate and to take into account again that unfortunately, but this is how it is these days, is not to forget that what is in social media is also something that the recruiters look at. So they don't only spend their days on LinkedIn. You could consider LinkedIn as a social media, it's more of a professional social media, let's say. But don't forget that the recruiters, they are like every single person. They look at Instagram, they look at TikTok, not to mention of course Facebook and whatever, and they are also looking at what is it that the executives communicate on these, let's call them lifestyle platforms, to be polite, and in some cases the content that they voice can be political, can be it can be of a different nature and something completely away and completely far from their professional occupation. But again, if you're the GM of a company, again, you're the face of the company, you're the voice of the company. You may be the person interviewed in the media, and you will be Mr. that brand, and what you say, what you put on social media about your leisure or about your ideas on this or this may not necessarily be in favor of you, in your favor in terms of professional advancement.
Yeah. So again, it boils down to understand what you want to achieve in your career and act and behave accordingly, whatever you do, right?
Yeah, I think there is, again, to come back to what we were discussing which is you were referring to people searching for new roles, people willing to change industries or career or their profession. It's looking for a job is a job. You know what I'm saying? It's you cannot just think that simply because you have achieved a certain number of things in your professional life, it will your next job will just come and will come right at your door. It's true that in some cases it does come at your door and you will get the right call from the right headhunter at the right moment. It happens to us, it happens that, I approach people and they tell me, Philippe, you're calling me at the right moment. This is the sequence is right. And let's meet and talk. And yes, this happens, fortunately, but in quite many cases, it doesn't happen this way. So my recommendation is that for people who are really looking for a change, they need to have a plan. So it's a job to it's a real work. You need to have a sort of a hygiene of job searching in a proper sense, meaning mapping, like I said earlier, the companies you're interested, the industries, of course, but also the companies, the new players, the companies who are changing the game, the disruptors, if you're particularly interested in those kind of companies who are, bringing something really new. So you need to identify the disruptors or the early adopters, let's say, and then to identify the right decision makers. It's not because if you consider, I don't know, Apple as the company you would like to work for, it's not because you're going to send your CV to Apple in your country that you're going to speak to the right person. So you need to also do your own screening of identify who are the different decision makers in the company that you target. So all of this is simply work.
Yeah. So if you are a business professional and you would like to change your career, your job, I think the people can get in touch with you. Also, if you are looking for new talents for your company, Philippe is here to help you. So how people can get in touch? How people can contact you?
Pretty simple. If they are on LinkedIn, they will find me easily on LinkedIn. If they can go on our website, which is hrpartners.eu, and they will find also quite some interesting information on our website, because I occasionally write articles on various topics. We also have this kind of a social activity, and we're organizing events here and there quite frequently. So they can easily contact me, LinkedIn, or on our website anytime they want.
Okay, so I will put definitely these links to the podcast episode description.
With pleasure.
So people can get in touch with you. So thank you so much, Philippe, for this interesting discussion from a quite unusual perspective of the headhunter, so person who is dealing with top talents within the C level suit. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Victor. It was very inspiring, and congratulations for your work.
Thank you. So, dear listeners, if you like and enjoy Change Talks podcast, please do not forget to give us a 5-star rating and follow to be informed about the new episodes. So, until next time, have a great day and make the change work.